Welcome to another episode of United for a Healthy Stoughton. Today we're going to talk about the value of coalitions, and I have a special guest with me here today, District Attorney Michael Morrissey.
Yeah.
And he's done so much work in his office with coalitions and building coalitions. We thought he was a perfect person to come and talk with us about this today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Stephanie. There's really two types of coalitions, as you know. There's the old ones, and not to say they are old, but you've been around for, I think you told me, 15 years.
Yeah.
OASIS has been, I've been the district attorney 9 years. And then there's the newer ones that you've helped me grow. You know, that some of the old timers have helped me, spread the word through the use of coalitions, because we think it's important with what's going on, particularly still with alcohol, but drugs are ever changing so quickly, to get the word out to people, and so they can educate their children or grandparents and others that, as you know, we work with different groups of people and we rely heavily upon the coalitions to do a lot of the work.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the work you've seeded out of your office. So one of the big things that you guys do is that you bring coalition leaders together every month to talk about the work. And we talked a little before the show about the mentoring stuff that you guys seeded. So let's talk about that.
When I became the district attorney, it didn't take me long to realize that what was killing people in Norfolk County were drug overdoses. And Billy Keating had warned me, my good friend, and he had warned me when he was leaving. He said drugs are getting to be a problem. And when he left, there was like 40 people a year that were dying of drug overdoses, and that was approximately 10 years ago.
Yep. And
he saw it, kind of the wave coming, and said you got to really keep an eye on it. And so the numbers kept going as he would tease me every once in a while in a polite way, saying, "Boy, when I left, only 40 people died, but you managed to get it to soon went to 70 to 80, then it kept climbing, and in its worst case, about 2 or 3 years ago, it hit 172 people. And those are people that the state police and the district attorney's office respond to all the unattended deaths.
Yep.
So so that means that they have to go out and determine accident or homicide, and that would include drug overdoses. So we keep figures on the drug overdose so we could track internally. The numbers are conservative because you could have the Stoughton person who dies in Quincy, let's say.
Right.
And so that wouldn't necessarily show up or die in Boston, and that wouldn't show up on the Stoughton statistics or in the county statistics. And that's one of the reasons why, as a result of some of our work, we thought that putting the word out how to educate people, and especially how to reach young people, how to reach their parents, how to reach the seniors, because they can play a role, because it's just getting them all and getting them, how do we do it? And we use the coalitions to do it. I know that will drive Jeff a little crazy, but there was one of the slides that we had, I think, that showed all of the where people get their drugs. They first get their drugs, and there was a little pie chart at the bottom. I know he can blow it up at the pie chart.
Yep.
At the bottom, it shows that 68% of the people get their first experience from your medicine cabinet, and we learned that early on. And that was something that we focused. The coalitions helped us develop some of the trends that we saw, like by following the overdoses and having the meetings and working hand in hand with the coalitions. We found out early on that people who were most vulnerable to an overdose were often people who had gone to recent treatment to
right, people coming out of treatment
rehab,
or incarceration.
Incarceration.
Yeah.
And so when I started, there was like 7 or so community coalitions, and you said you were here 15 years. I know the people in Avon have been around. The people in Weymouth had a pretty good one. The people in Walpole and Needham, they had long-term coalitions that were like staples. And then we said, well, gee, if we're really going to help get the word out, we can't reach people. We have good community partners, but we got to grow coalitions. And so, as you said, we deputized you as a mentor. And so we said, Stoughton is really successful. Could you pull a couple of people up from the ground up and explain to them what you do and the value of a community coalition? And one of the things, like getting on TV like now, is good for both of us.
Right.
And so, how to get the word out? So I think we stuck you with Randolph and Sharon, and did you get?
We've done a lot of work with Holbrook and Canton, and so I think one of the things that was neat about that is, so you were doing that work sort of more casually with us early on, and then a grant came out from the Department of Public Health, and we were able to officially be sort of a mentor community to Canton, Holbrook, and Walpole through this SAPSI grant, the Substance Abuse Prevention Collaborative.
That helped both of us.
And that helped everybody and bring more resources into the county. Needham was able to do the same thing and leverage their area. Yeah.
And I think down south, I think Franklin, those areas also got together as well.
Yep, and Weymouth and Quincy are supporting other coalitions as well. Yeah.
So that seems to work well. And then we got a national grant through Hal Rogers.
Right.
The Congressman Rogers. And then Billy Keating has been active in Washington on that, Stevie Lynch, and trying to make sure we get money for education. And we sent a whole group of us. I know there's a photo, an old photo with Chief Shastany. We all went down. We've been down a couple of years. That's Brian is now the deputy, and now you see the chief with our uniform on. She's incognito, I think, now the chief. And Chief Doloff, and so we went down a couple times to the national conference, and one year we also presented. One of the things that
was this year, I think. This fancy picture was the year we presented together. Yep. And
one of the things that we did was we recognized before a lot of people did that. I know Quincy was in a pilot program involving the use of Narcan and naloxone, and so I should say from the outset, I think you and I speak the same language. But
right.
When people hear us say Narcan or naloxone, it's really the same.
Right. And it's an overdose reversal drug for opiates specifically. So heroin, OxyContin, things that fall into that category, fentanyl.
And so naloxone is the name that DuPont gave the drug.
Right.
And the generic is Narcan.
No, I think it's the other way around. Yeah, Narcan is the
DuPont version. And
yes.
Naloxone is the generic term that everybody uses.
Right.
So if you hear that, we mean the same thing. And if someone uses it interchangeably, just so people know. And it's really... before you had when they started the program in the state, Quincy was very successful, and the Quincy police stepped up, and they were showing how quickly they could reverse. Now, when we did that, I think it was 2 milligrams of naloxone in a. You had to put the vial together and stuff, and now it's 4 milligrams of naloxone. And when we first started doing it, the price was like, I don't know, it was under
very inexpensive.
Under $20, and then the manufacturers started gouging everybody. It went to over $60 a dose. Yep. I know Maura Healey stepped in and sued the manufacturers and brought it down to a more reasonable level. And the state set up a fund to help do that. Insurers are now stepping in, also helping as well. So,
but I think one of the things that was so great about the Narcan program. So you were saying Quincy had this pilot project, and they were in the county, and then the Chief Shastany at the time had said, why can't we do this in Stoughton?
We called the Department of Public Health.
Yep.
And asked them if they had a doctor on board who was overseeing. Weymouth Fire was also in it. I think it was like 8 or 10 communities. And so we wanted them to write a standing order so that we could start getting Narcan out to more departments. And Chief Shastany said the same thing. He said, well, why can't we do it? And there wasn't any reason in our mind why. And I used to joke with him. He went ahead and we organized. Stoughton was one of the leads, and Norwood and Chief Brooks was, willing to take part, but Stoughton put it together. We ended up corralling Dr.
Dan Muse.
Dr. Dan Muse. And Dr. Muse is head of emergency medicine in Brockton and lives in the county. And grew up in Brookline. I knew his family. His brother Michael is a friend, and he used to practice law in the same building as his mother and father. His mother was a well-respected probate court judge, and the Muses have been always community-oriented and active people.
And he's our...
He's the unofficial unpaid, he's the official unpaid advisor, medical advisor of the district attorney's office.
Yes, and he's also, he's the medical director for our fire department, so we have that other Stoughton link with him as well.
And he's free with his time. I can remember we wanted to run he came in and we had a pharmacist on staff, that Dave Morgan, and the police and fire departments here in Stoughton and Norwood. We had all the Recessa Annies and everything, and we had to train the trainer over at Blue Hills. And so we trained a lot of people. We were the first county to do that, to make sure that every emergency medical personnel, police and fire, had access to Narcan. And that, I think, was how we helped stem the tide. It hasn't solved the problem, but it's kept people alive.
Yes, and I think that was a really important initiative that we wouldn't have been able to do without partnering with your department, and it allowed really the whole county to kind of rise up together.
Quincy was easy. I lived there and I saw it going on. And before, the police were kind of not sure. Then it got to the point, who saved more people? And so they were having a race to see, who actually. And it was easy to administer. And Dr. Muse used to remember, he'd say to us that naloxone. They said you can take a bath in this stuff, and,
Right.
and it won't kill you.
Yep. Yeah,
And
it's
so-
very safe, and that's its
Only if
only
you-
function. Only
only if it's
reverses an
opiates,
overdose.
right?
Yep.
And
Right.
so you see that more and more. Now we also have worked with the coalitions, and we've trained nurses in our schools and athletic trainers, and again, it's not because we think there's a problem with drugs in the schools, but if you think about what the schools are used for, who comes in?
Right.
Parents.
Yep.
And outside groups often rent them, and so it's just one more tool in the toolbox. And so we didn't want people to think that, hey, we have all these big drug problems, and so we had to overcome that stigma and that resistance, and in some school systems, and so we've trained a lot of all the school nurses, and it's really just one more tool. And not because you can expect young kids, but you could have a elementary school child and a parent come in who may have a substance abuse problem. And we had a juror in one of the courthouses early on that had been trained by Learn to Cope, which is another great community partner that you guys refer people to.
Absolutely. Yep.
Joanne Peterson, and they're having their anniversary. I believe it's this week, I think.
Oh, wow. Yeah, they've been around a little bit longer than our coalition has,
I think
believe.
they could be on 20 years, 15, 20 years, but they have an anniversary coming up Thursday night at Granite Links in Quincy. They're having a big event, raise some money.
Yep.
And so they train anybody who goes to Learn to Cope. If you think you're alone, look up Learn to the number two Cope.
Yep.
Just go online, look up Learn to Cope. They have chapters that start out as one small chapter and has grown over the years. They have multiple chapters, I think 30 or 40 now.
Yep.
I think even they're outside of Massachusetts. And you go in there and you find out that you're not alone. There are other parents or people, spouses, children who are in the same position you are. And you learn a lot on how to deal with issues dealing with opiate use and abuse.
Right. Yep.
And so we've tried to get that education, but we've used groups like the Coalition to help get the word out. And that's where the real value has been.
Yep, absolutely. I think some of the other things that we've done together that I love and I think I've really appreciated about working with you has been thinking about positive community norms. And so a number of years back, with your support, we were able to do a really large countywide training.
We had
Dr. Jeff Linkenbach, yep.
Now he's kind of the guru of when we tell, I guess, to break down community norms. So people always talk about data-driven.
Yep.
How to do a response based upon data.
Yep.
And he's the person.
He's one of the guys, yeah. So this is a great picture of you and me a long time ago with Dr. Linkenbach, yep. And yeah, so he talks really about that intersection between using science and research and data, and how do we promote all the good choices that our kids are already making. So I think it's pretty unique, in particular for a district attorney, to be able to think about that and talk about that, because the population of young people and adults that you have to deal with.
I usually see the kids who have gone over the edge and made the mistake.
Right.
But I don't.
But we know they're in the minority, right?
Well, I like to think they are, because if it was the majority, I'd be swamped. But we deal with some complex problems. But one of the things that Dr. Linkenbach reinforced, and you reminded me, we did a interview on time with one of the local TV stations. They wanted us to say how drugs and alcohol are really a big problem for young people.
Right.
And the short answer was, it's a problem, but it's a small problem. And I'm one of those firm believers of small problems we can deal with, and big problems have big consequences. But the data was showing that it was really a small percentage of kids who were using marijuana, drugs, and alcohol. And that's why the data-driven piece that Dr. Linkenbach would push actually. We had all sorts of questions from him about, well, how do you know the kids aren't lying? And
that's right. Yep.
And the answer really was, statistically speaking, across the United States, all the data we have collected, we know what where the norm should be. And if you're that far out of whack, then there's either something wrong or you got a big problem.
Right. Right. Yep. Yeah.
And so I think that helped us focus on. That's why we've done other programs like the basketball camp. We focus on good kids, and we run a peer leadership program where like 10 high school kids from Stoughton compete in a series of challenges that we have against other schools. And your rival is probably Canton, so you probably peered up against Canton. And so, like for instance, one of the things we do is try to get people to take the online drunk driving program they have that Arbella Insurance supports.
Yep.
and they bring a lot of times they bring the that vehicle, the
the
distractology.
Yeah, yep.
And so my niece actually works with Arbella and does a lot of that. And so, but they're a great community partner, and they're a great statewide partner. So we try to identify resources, and as you said, those meetings that we have every month are an opportunity for people to share ideas. And some of those ideas, I know that maybe we can have Jeff put up the take back. One of the things that we did early on was the drug take back box, and so the other one, the other thing was safely store it and properly dispose of it, and we're finding with such a high percentage of people who were getting their first experience with drugs, we're getting it from people's medicine cabinets. We thought putting in the drug take back. We saw the Department of Public Health had given small grants to certain areas. We said, well, the heck with this. We partner with every community, and I think we paid for, in some cases, the entire box and didn't have any money, or it was a 50-50 split. And those boxes, we had tons of drugs. And then it got to be, well, who's going to take the drugs, and what are we going to do with them? And so I used to chair the Energy Committee in the legislature, and Covanta has been a great community partner. And they would take the drugs and burn them, and so they bring them up, and they put forms online at the DEP, and the police departments bring them up, whether it's once a month or twice a year, whatever they can tolerate in their storage room.
Right. And I think our department is bringing those things up every other week. Actually, really? Yeah, the box is really getting used, which is amazing, and that's what we want to happen. We want all that stuff out of the house.
It's no questions asked. I mean, we don't want them dumping it down the toilet because it'll screw up the groundwater, or if you're dumping into the bay, like where I live, it ends up in Quincy Bay, Mass Bay.
Right.
So we want people to dispose of them appropriately. Of course, you can grind them up type of thing and put them in coffee grounds, and that just get out of the police station, throw them in a plastic bag, and just drop them in, no questions asked. Rip the label off the plastic tube and drop them in. No one, no one questions what they're doing, because you just don't want young kids to have access to those drugs, and that's true for seniors. I would spend some time educating seniors who, as you get older, you may end up using pain medication more and more. So, so that worked out well, and then I think we all got together. We did a piece, and we thought that. Well, we think the medical community can play a role. We've had safe prescribing conferences. And we tell the coalitions who encourage various practitioners to come, to let them know they can be part of it. But pharmacists can also be a critical element. Where you have active pharmacists on your coalition.
We do. In fact, one of our local pharmacists is chairing our coalition currently, which is
He's an
fantastic.
Awesome person.
He's awesome, Dr. Todd Brown, so we appreciate that.
And we had a pharmacist working with us for a number of years, and then we put out another piece that it had to do with what we consider yellow flags, and Jeffrey showed it for me. And that was just, we didn't call it red flags because we don't want pharmacists not to prescribe medication, but we want them to be aware that there's a lot of times when a patient could be paying cash, or he arrives late at night or weekends before closing, with making verification difficult, or chronic early refills. And there's a whole bunch of things to go through, and looking for high dosage of controlled substances, or other things that might stand out, or prescription cocktails that may include opioids, benzos, and muscle relaxants. Those are things that should be a signal to a pharmacist that a person may have a problem. So we gave out these forms that they eliminated so the pharmacist could have them, just as a reminder. And
we did we actually went on a little tour of our pharmacies a couple times with the pharmacist from your office, the coalition, a police officer from Stoughton, and reminded our pharmacists that they can always call the police when they have concerns, and made sure they had all these resources. And
we also we had the secret shoppers that
that's right.
I might as well pull out the other part that we also do a what they call the Norfolk Cares program, and we give out bags, and in the bags there's a series of resources that we know that people who may be struggling from addiction, that the safe disposal of needles is an issue, so we include a shops container, and we also provide all sorts of resources, that again, is stigma, it's a disease, that it's in 2 languages, in Spanish and English. It's not a choice, it's a disease. Then we provide just a general summary of if you need help, there's plenty of help out there, and don't be afraid to call. And then we show people how to use naloxone, And then there's also on the front of this is a prescription.
There it is.
On the back there's what to do when you have to provide it, rescue breathing and clearing the airway, and find out what to do. And then this is the old card that actually shows you're still putting the dosage, but now they come together. You don't have to assemble them. But on the front, if everybody in Massachusetts has insurance, and you can go to the pharmacies now and buy over the counter. That's one of the things that Dr. Buse has helped us push, is that you don't have to get a prescription.
Right.
You can get naloxone. So if you have a loved one who's suffering from the potential of a drug overdose, go down to the pharmacy and keep naloxone. I keep some in the car just in case. You never know where I am.
Right,
And
right.
State police and all the police officers.
And so people can just fill this
Fills it
out
out.
and slide it right over to the pharmacist. They don't
right.
even have to ask if they're
Right, if they're embarrassed.
Right.
Exactly. And
Yep.
that was one of the things that reminds me. One of the secret shoppers, we had coalitions go in, and then one of the
Yep.
pharmacies, somebody yelled, "Hey, do we have any of that naloxone stuff?"
Right, right.
And so that you don't have to do that. If you have insurance, put the number. They'll take the insurance, and then how to recognize an overdose and who may be at risk. We also talk about the physical signs of opiate abuse. Flu-like symptoms, itchy skin, runny nose, dark circles in the eyes, tiny pupils, changes in behavior, objects that may be a clue. Cotton balls, bent spoon, Q-tip heads, bottle cap, syringe, things like that, and symptoms of an overdose. What it looks like, and that's one of the things we found with work, and we passed on to the coalitions, was if you have someone who has a drug use opiate disease problem, that when you hear them snoring, we used to hear parents say, "Geez, Johnny just got out of rehab," and they'd check on him. Think about it, over the years that you had a loved one, you kind of hover over them, and they'd check on him. They'd say, "Gee, I checked on Johnny at 10 o'clock last night. He was in bed and I heard him snoring." Well, the snoring we found out from the work we did with the police departments and the overdoses and interviewing people, because when there's an overdose, we treat it as a crime scene. Snoring was one of the big indicators that the person is going into respiratory arrest. And there was labored breathing. It wasn't snoring.
So it's actually a warning sign.
That's a warning sign.
Yeah.
And so we try to pass that on, that snoring is not good. And so the common successful themes of people in long-term recovery, and that's abstinence, staying away from people who use drugs, just some of the things that we found out that work. And then a lifeline for addiction, that there is help in the Mass Bar Association, has a toll-free number. They'll help people and with addiction issues. And finally, if you see an overdose, how to call 911. It's in 2 languages, and make the right call to tell people. The sooner we get to them, the more likely we are to save them.
Right.
We put the substance abuse resource disorder list, and where you get help, toll-free numbers and groups that can call locally. Family support, like Learn to Cope. We have their website, BAMSI Cope Center, Al-Anon, Alateen, AdCare, Smart Recovery, Allies in Recovery, things like that, advocacy programs. And finally, adolescent services.
Yep, which is important to us as a Adolescent Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition in particular. But we know that our kids are being impacted in families and homes where people are struggling.
Sure.
And if we, it's so important to us as a community to really be helping families have those resources. We want people to be able to get help. They need to be alive to get help. And your partnership with our police departments and the ability to get these into homes when there's been an overdose is so important.
And the fire department, they play their first responders.
Absolutely,
and the schools. I mean, we also do other vaping is it now come on the scene.
Yep.
I know that's something that you guys are interested in. I mean,
we've spent a lot of time doing doing community education, working on policy stuff, and then you guys have helped out communities with
we just give a grant.
Vaping devices.
Yeah, I think I forget what the cost was for it, but I think we offer every community the opportunity to get like 4 or 5 vape detectors, and so. I did a show on vaping, I think, on one of my talks. And I learned a lot from. There's a woman who's coordinating Norfolk County for the state, and talking. It's not smoke, it's vapor.
It's vapor, right? Yep.
And but they have detectors that will detect that. So we gave a grant that they can put in, particularly at the high schools, and it goes right to a phone.
Yep.
And so they have security go check, and not that you don't want to throw anybody out of school, but you just got to grab them and tell them this is a danger,
Right.
And maybe give them some further education. And now we would see people die because of vaping. It's become increasingly critical.
Yeah, yep. And it's a good tool for us to be able to use in conjunction with some of the other work that's happening in our schools and our abilities to help these students and
Yeah,
you know, try to prevent
you and I
further
aren't big
harm.
on punishing people in the sense that we want to get them help.
Right.
That help, maybe counseling or other type of assistance, and you know, getting kids thrown out of school is not the answer. You want to keep them in school,
Correct.
but get them the education that they deserve.
Right. Yep. And you know, for some of our kids, we know with vaping, because the nicotine is so addictive, that you know what they might need are additional support services to help quit. That's you know, for some kids, that's really what they're struggling with.
And then we worked with you more recently. You know, that we still lose a person a week in motor vehicle homicide in the county. A lot of it drug and alcohol.
Yep.
And you reminded me that we sponsored a training with tips training. We invited all of the bars in Stoughton and the surrounding area to come and get a free training for their wait staff.
Yep, which was great for us. Yep, yep.
And Stoughton has changed their policy. Quincy has it too. In order to work in a restaurant, you have to go through a
responsible beverage server
class.
training.
Right.
Yeah. So that was a great resource for us too, to be able to say, you know, the policy has changed, but we can offer this to you for free.
Yeah, we're not saying people shouldn't drink. We just said just be responsible and help identify it. We do.
As long as they're a grown up.
well, as long as they're grown up.
Right.
We do that at the holiday to remind the bars, make sure to try to get people home. So I know we're starting to run a little bit on time.
I know, we're getting close.
I know,
yeah.
But I just, the coalitions are really the way that I use, and I think a big value to get the word out about some of the problems we face from the, kind of the womb to the tomb, you know, I mean, the young kids all the way up to the people, you know, the older people. And I appreciate the work that's done here. One of the oldest and better coalitions in the county. Oh,
when we appreciate, I mean, I think that your office has been so supportive of all of the work, that your focus on using data to make decisions and to think about, you know, not just giving us data to help us make informed decisions, but hearing from coalitions about what we're learning, our school-based surveys, you know, when we talk to people, what they tell us about really what's happening, and then you're able to use that information and to leverage some of these drug forfeiture dollars to really help communities and give back. And it's
I see the picture
huge.
of the basketball program.
Yeah.
We do all good stuff. So I appreciate the opportunity to come and again talk to the people of Stoughton and talk to you, and thank Jeffrey for his help.
Yeah.
Hidden in the back room. So.
That's right. Yeah. Anytime. We love having you on the show, and we appreciate it. And I know you're wearing your orange today.
I have. These are my Stoughton colors. I wear them every day though.
That's right.
Mean, I have orange and black in my campaign colors. It was the color of a boat I had as a kid, so a spinnaker on a boat, so my parents could always see how good or bad I was doing.
Yep, so they could spy you.
So I wear an orange tie most of the time.
We'll pretend that it's really because of your deep love of Stoughton.
I do well here. I like the Stoughton community. I have a lot of people who work in the office who are from Stoughton.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. So I think with that, we're out of time, but thank you again for coming and joining us today, and we really appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thanks a lot.